So maybe you're a little frustrated with your turkey hunting seasons for the last several years and you're not really sure what to do. Well, I have a few simple suggestions that might help you attract and hold more adult birds to your property. Be back in just a second. Hey, thanks for sticking around. This is Gen 10-9, where we give common sense advice for everyday hunting and fishing situations for your average sportsman. And today we're talking about turkey hunting and specifically ways that we can attract and keep more adult birds on our property. So with that in mind, let's get started. Number one, stop shooting jakes. Now this might be somewhat controversial. I understand that if you're trying to just put meat on the table, then, I know where you're coming from and I understand. And if you're a grandpa and you're just trying to teach the grandkids how to turkey hunt, then, take an occasional jake every now and then is really not a big deal. But think about this. The more jakes you take off of your property, then the less adult gobblers you'll have on your property coming next spring. So if you're a grandpa or just somebody trying to teach somebody how to turkey hunt, you should also be teaching them the responsibilities of conservation. And by that I mean, you need to tell them and explain to them you don't want to take the young birds off the property because the real fun in turkey hunting is interacting with the big toms, the adult birds. And the fact of the matter is, it's really simple to shoot jakes. It's not really a challenge. They virtually commit assisted suicide because they're curious about everything. Now, really, they're not that fun to hunt. They're easy to harvest. The real fun is interacting with big mature toms and trying to call in a big tom and harvest that particular bird. So with that in mind, do yourself a favor. If you want to really enjoy turkey hunting, then stop shooting jakes. So 2, hunt hens in the fall and predators in the winter. And what I mean by that is this is probably a suggestion for properties that actually have a high density of turkey already, and specifically hens. Because the fact of the matter is, if you have a lot of hens on your property, then it's really hard to entice a gobbler to leave hens that they can see and come to you where they don't know where you're at and they don't know exactly what hen you are. Because that's asking a lot of a gobbler, to actually leave a hen that he sees and come and find you. Chances are mature gobblers aren't going to do that. You might get a satellite bird to leave a hen because a dominant bird is taking up the attention. But to get the really big guys, he's not leaving a bird he sees in order to come find you. And today, a lot of times turkey hunters are finding out that all the gobblers are henned up. And that means there's just so many hens, it's hard to get them to get away from birds that are in their view. So if that's your situation, if you have a high hen density in your hunting property, then you might want to start taking up hen hunting in the fall. And that means fall turkey hunting, actually trying to harvest hens so that you can increase the ratio of gobblers to hens come springtime. And you also might want to consider hunting predators, specifically coyotes in the winter. So that's something you may want to consider because that'll give you the opportunity to maybe decrease your hen population, increase the number of gobblers per hens there are on your property, and then you might also be able to start reducing the number of predators that are actually preying on your turkey population on your property. So that's one thing you might want to keep in mind when you're considering ways to increase the number of gobblers on your property in the springtime. Something you might not be aware of is that trapping is becoming increasingly popular today. And if you're not a trapper, you might want to consider allowing a trapper access to your property, because what trappers will do is they will actually reduce the population of predators on your property. And that means they'll be taking coyotes, bobcats, and they'll also possibly be taking nest robbers like raccoons and other animals like that. And so the idea behind this is by decreasing the actual predator population, you might be able to increase the successful nesting and survival rate of turkeys during the spring, summer, and fall so that they'll be available to you in the following spring. Next, know your terrain. Now, this is not a big deal if you're hunting Grandpa's back 50 acres, But if you're about to hunt a new farm or you're about to hunt state property, it's in your best interest to beforehand buy a topographical map of the property you're going to hunt. And then 2 weeks before the hunting season actually begins, go out and actually walk the property and find out where the ravines are, the thickets, and the creeks. Because you don't want to show up on opening morning and then at 8:30 in the morning get a big tom all hot and bothered, excited to come meet you. But for some reason, he hangs up 150 yards out. And later on during lunchtime, you walk the property and find out you were expecting him to either fly over a ravine, cross a flooded creek, or walk through a really dense forest where he runs the risk of being ambushed. Remember this about turkey behavior. It is the inclination of gobblers to call hens to them, not for gobblers to call hens and then go to them. Now, they will do that, but the big toms and the mature birds, they expect the hens to come to them. So if you are hunting and you're interacting with a big mature bird and suddenly you discover he's hung up, well, there may be a reason. You're asking him to do too much. And your only reason you're asking him to do too much is you don't know the property. And you don't know there's a flooded creek between you and him, or a ravine, or a big thicket. So do yourself a favor. 2 weeks before the season, walk and learn the terrain. Put birds to bed and discover strut zones. Now, in case you didn't know, putting a bird to bed is actually going out the night before and listening for where the birds are roosting. And that's what turkeys do. That's what gobblers do. They gobble just before they go dark at night, and they announce to all the hens their specific location. So if you're not in a habit of putting birds to bed, what might be happening to you is that you pick a particular place to be in the morning, and you schedule your day off, and you go to that place in the morning. Well, guess what? None of the gobblers are roosting on your property or in your area. They've gone to bed on a different property in a different location. So you've taken the time to schedule your day off, and you went and picked a spot where there are no birds. Do yourself a favor, the night before you're going to go hunting, go out to your property and see if there are any gobblers that are roosting on your property. If they're not there, you should pick an alternate location. If you can find where birds are roosting, chances are within eyesight of where the tree they're in, there's a strut zone. And that's generally a place where a mature gobbler will come down off the roost and in the morning strut in order to attract hens to him for that morning breeding time. So a lot of times gobblers have strut zones. They fight over those strut zones. They're usually premier breeding areas. And so the mature toms will be in the roost. They'll come down to their strut zone, or sometimes they won't even come down out of the tree until hens are in their strut zone, and then they'll come down. If you can find those strut zones without bumping the bird, you've hit gold. And especially if you can get close to those strut zones, you're really in a prime piece of real estate. So one of the things you want to do is do a little extra work the night before, put your birds to bed, and on top of that, try to discover the strut zones of the toms you're hunting. Next, stop educating your birds during preseason. And some of you are saying, well, what do you mean by that? Stop showing up before the hunting season even begins and walking around using your favorite call in order to try to find gobblers. Because chances are, if you're walking around your property using a game call, using your favorite bird call, you're actually bumping more birds than you realize. And one thing they find out that your favorite call is not a hen, it's a hunter. And chances are you're really screwing up your hunt before you even get there. So one thing you ought to do is, if you're going to scout your property, don't take your turkey calls. You can take an owl call or a crow call, but don't take a turkey call. And your best effort, or the best thing to do for scouting your property, is just sit quietly in the morning and wait for the birds to gobble naturally, or walk the property and find out what they're scratching and feeding. try to learn their circuit. Don't try to call to them, because chances are the only thing you're doing is identifying to the gobbler what is not a hen and what is a hunter. So do yourself a favor. Stop educating your birds during the preseason. Next, foster nesting habitat. Now this might be a little difficult for you if you don't actually own the land you're hunting on, because the fact of the matter is a lot of farmers like to maintain their fields and they'll mow right up to the edge of the woods. So you're probably not going to find a farmer that will keep his fields unmowed. Maybe you can convince him to leave about a 50-yard stretch here or a 50-yard stretch there, about 10 feet wide. Try to convince him to let it go into natural grasses and wild grasses, and at least until the nesting period's over, then go ahead and mow. By doing that, you can create or encourage birds to nest on your property. Another thing you might want to do if you own about 200 acres of hardwoods, you know, in every bit of woods there's a half-acre meadow here or an acre meadow there. You know, a meadow that's about the size of an acre. You might want to consider expanding those 1 acre, half-acre meadows to about 5 acres. And there's an upside to this, because a lot of times when you create these larger meadows, you actually attract other game that you might like to hunt throughout the year. So you might want to get into finding out how to manage your property and how to foster and build a meadow. Now you want to preserve your thickets. You don't want to clear cut your thickets, because those are your whitetail sanctuaries. So you want to stay away from the thickets. But try to increase the meadow sizes in the property you hunt if you're hunting nothing but big timber. The bottom line is this: if you can't foster nesting habitat, then you're going to motivate less hens to be on your property. And that's the goal. The goal is to try to get hens to want to nest on your property. Regrettably, they're kind of dumb. They may not get the memo, and they may not choose your property to nest on. But if you're not doing anything as far as fostering nesting property or nesting habitat, then you don't stand a prayer of getting more birds on your property. And that's the goal. Get more birds, because more hens produce other birds on your property. And even if you only have hens on your property, sooner or later, the toms will find out where the hens are and they'll start showing up on your property. So do yourself a favor, foster nesting habitat. And lastly, stop watching commercials that are posed as turkey hunting videos. A lot of these videos are shot on corporate ranches or big private properties that are about 1,000 acres and get little hunting pressure. And they use these places just to sell product, either their call or their blind or some other turkey hunting gimmick. And the secret about these properties is they're littered with feeding stations. And turkeys are both smart and dumb. One, they're smart because they know the sound of these feeding stations. And they're generally in the area waiting for that sound to go off, because they know dinner's on the table. So they come running to the sound of those feeding stations go off. And at the same time, there's some shill using their call, and they're not really calling in birds. They're just executing them on the way to the dinner table. And a lot of times, that's just not a natural hunting environment. It's not even really fair chase. Yeah, the birds aren't fenced in and it's open area, but the reality is it's an artificial situation. And a lot of the things they're doing just won't work in state land or properties that get high turkey hunting pressure. It's just a gimmick. It's just an artificial situation that really won't help you bag that big bird. Instead of watching these videos, you need to start watching YouTube videos and documentaries about turkey behavior. You need to actually study the animal you're hunting and learn what they're doing, when they're doing it, and where they're doing it. And you can only do that by watching videos that are just not trying to sell you product. And so do yourself a favor. Stop watching those artificial videos and start learning about real, wild turkey hunting behavior. So with that in mind, thus endeth the lesson. If you appreciated the video, hit like. Again, thanks for watching, and God bless.